You hear me in the back? Yes. By the way, I'm willing to be dictated to by the clock if it means that we can have the different services going on all at the same time, and especially two different services. So it's good. Hello to everybody on Zoom and on live stream. I have to give always special hellos to my mom, to Bubby, to Emily. As many of you know, 20 years ago, feels like a long, long time ago, it both is and isn't, I had a mild heart attack 3 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. My predecessor, Rabbi David Teitelbaum of blessed memory, who was Rabbi Emeritus, stepped in to ease the burden on me by delivering a couple high holiday sermons. By the way, I'm still grateful for that kindness, for that ability to see me, and the ability to say, how can I help, and sharing out of love. And I made it to synagogue. I even gave a couple of the sermons, but to hear Rabbi Teitelbaum was such a blessing. In one sermon, he talked about teshuvah, a good high holiday topic. And he defined it as returning, lashuv, to turn to our best self. And he lifted it up as the most ennobling of concepts. He says, this teaches us that we can change. He taught teshuvah as a catalyst for renewed self, for repaired relationships. And he said, and I remember this so vividly, he said, as we acknowledge and learn from our mistakes, as we speak to people where there has been hurt, those actions are stepping stones to new and better places. We become the people we want and should be. By the way, what a promise. The example he brought in this sermon was doing teshuvah in terms of how we take care and prioritize our health. It was such an important message, like all of the sermons that he gave throughout his career. But here's how I heard the sermon about prioritizing health. It felt like he was talking directly to me. And he was saying these words, Nat, you haven't taken care of yourself. Excuse after excuse, rationalizing all the reasons you haven't made health a priority. And look what happened. Heart attack. Get it together, young man. By the way, poor guy. He did what often happens in sermons. He spoke one message, and the people who heard it through the lens of their own issues. I heard a beautiful message, an inspiring message, a message about self-care, and I turned it into a message of harsh judgment. I beat my chest for the sin of neglecting my health, sitting with shame and blame. I look back and I reflect that this is a moment that was about me, but it's really about us. We often confuse this noble concept, teshuvah, turning, with harsh judgment on ourselves and others. We take an ennobling concept and make it hurtful. I bring this story today in the context of the Rosh Hashanah sermon I delivered, where I looked at the Unatane Tokef prayer, not as God writing our fate based on our behavior, but God inscribing all that happens to us, some of which we have no control over, and reading that book with care and with love, and reminding us that we do have some control. Our control is how we respond to our fate. And that line in the prayer that you'll say soon, that teshuvah, turning to our best self, that tefillah, lifting up our voices, tzedakah, turning to those who are in need, those are things which transform the severity of the decree. And that message that we have the capacity to transform our fate is so true. And today I want us to look at how we misunderstand at least the concept of teshuvah, so that the story we write is a beautiful story. A story that when God reads it, God says, wow, what beautiful actions were taken to learn and to grow, as opposed to reading with sadness a story of harsh self-judgment. How is teshuvah misunderstood? Well, one way that it's misunderstood is simply in the tone of harshness, harsh judgment, rather than gentleness, patience, compassion. We often reflect on where we've missed the mark and don't celebrate our accomplishments, each step being something worthy of celebration. Often our teshuvah work gets too narrow and doesn't look at a big picture. We often think that teshuvah is like, okay, I'm going to do this act and be done. But really, teshuvah is digging deep. It's being curious. It's listening with heart and humility, knowing that we don't have every answer. And it's knowing that some changes only come in small steps over time. As I look back on my cardiac incident, several pieces of what teshuvah might have looked like emerge, and I share them not to overshare. I share them because I think the categories I'm going to talk about are categories that we all experience. There's a universal in the experience that I'm using as an example. I realize, looking back, you know how you wish that you knew what you know now? I think that's a song by Rod Stewart. I wish that I had realized then that teshuvah is rarely quick and easy. I am a problem solver. Here's the problem. Here is the solution. I was taught that. I do it well. Problem, heart attack. Solution, a few stents. God bless stents. A new health regime, I'm going to do it. Some changed perspective, gratitude, maybe a sermon or two about lessons learned, inspiring, and on we go. Heart attack, rear view mirror. But life is not straight lines, and real change does not come in a flash. Maimonides taught something extraordinary. He says sometimes teshuvah takes time. Real change needs to account for the fact that life is not a straight line. It oscillates, it wobbles, it twists, it tangles, it turns about. We need to allow ourselves to process as we are able, at our own pace, realizing that it's the process that reveals what we need to experience. There's a book that's on the book of, go read it. It's by Bruce Feiler, Life is in the Transitions. And Feiler argues that life quakes, whatever they may be, a loss, a health, job, something that happened emotionally with a relationship. Life quakes inevitably come. You all know that. They're usually without warning. They're often multiple simultaneously, and they take more time than we think they should to integrate and learn about. He talks about how we Americans kind of have internalized life as a nice curve, and it's not that way. In fact, he's researched, he's done tons and tons of interviews. And through his research, he teaches that the thing people are most surprised about is when he asks the question, how long did it take you to get through this life quake? And most people say, oh, it took too long. You know how long he says most life quakes take to get through? 5 years, sometimes more. Let's give ourselves time to unwrap the many pieces and behaviors connected to what occurs in our life. That's a lesson I just didn't understand, and I think we often don't understand it, particularly when it comes to loss. We need to face the collective life quake of these past few years. And those who come with quick solutions are people who we should be wary of. The disruption and upheaval we have experienced has upended our world. And if we want to emerge with meaning and purpose, we have to sit with, process, dig deeper, respond thoughtfully, and it will take time. We need to revisit and rewrite. We need to listen to other stories as we reorient and find deeper meanings. By the way, some things do require immediate attention and change. We don't have the luxury of time. Knowing the difference between what does and doesn't is a piece of wisdom, but most things, particularly response to these last few years, require time. As I explored tshuva after my cardiac incident, I came to understand that I do what so many of us do, which is hide from, deny, and maybe am unable yet unconsciously to see all of the emotions connected to the experience. Teshuvah, in the best sense, requires creating space for all the conflicting emotions and feelings. By the way, I heard Rabbi Teitelbaum's words as condemnation because I was terrified about what had happened, what it might mean, how I was going to deal with the new life reality. It was easier to go to harsh self-judgment and to hit my chest angrily, look for quick solutions, rather than confront the real emotions. And I think that is so many of us. We haven't learned to accept difficult emotions. I wish I could go back and simply sit with all of the emotions. You know, I'm someone who's just naturally positive. My mother says I was born that way. I'm someone who believes passionately in creating blessing from pain. My deeper teshuvah was to create room for sadness and loss, pain and uncertainty, woven together with recovery and appreciation. There's a book I recommended at Rosh Hashanah. Really get it. Susan Cain's book, Bittersweet. She goes deeper. She says that which I experienced is actually a huge piece of American culture. That American culture often does not make room for sadness. And she goes into many of the whys, and she brings interesting research. She talks that we're taught to be cheerful, to keep negative feelings hidden, that often we blame ourselves for sadness, not measuring up to the positive affect we feel people expect from us. My response to Rabbi Teitelbaum's sermon was really about avoiding the emotions that the sermon brought up. And again, I want to be gentle with myself looking back. Maybe I needed time to do that. Maybe it needed to come out slowly. But let's catch ourselves pushing away or negatively judging certain emotions. Let's accept, let's process, let's sit with what's real. Susan Cain points out that there's a steep price for our cultural legacy of forced positivity, depression, confusion, avoidance. When we try to push away and deny sadness and sorrow, those emotions grow and they come out in all kinds of ways. And when we create time to say, I'm not okay, doors open. Often creativity and meaning emerge. We find pieces of light and purpose in unexpected places. And so I'm asking all of us to become comfortable with joy and sadness sitting together, gratitude and anxiety intermingling. We can be honest and share vulnerability in ways that connect rather than putting on an inauthentic affect. This is a key piece of true tshuva, of seeking to find and act upon becoming our better selves by allowing ourselves to be whoever we are rather than the mask that we put on of who we think people expect us to be. Think about that book that you're authoring, some things over which you have no control, that book of life that God will read. I wish I could have heard Rabbi Teitelbaum's call to health and not focus solely on the story I wrote being one of places I fell short. I hope that your books can celebrate the small and significant changes. I wish that I had given myself a pat on the back and not a thump on the chest, celebrating small victories because they were there. I did take the need to make change incredibly seriously. In many ways, I can look back and call this scare a blessing because of those changes, but I needed to do it more gently. And then, by the way, we dig even deeper. We say, what haven't I looked at? And some of the things we look at are things that, again, take their time to understand more deeply. As I dug deeply, I knew initially I needed to deal with stress. But what does it mean to deal with stress? And I would actually say that dealing with stress is the issue I hear from so many of you. We know the connection between stress and well-being and health, and most of us have work to do. By the way, I've dug into it. You've probably heard it in sermons over the years. I meditate. It's good for stress reduction. I took a class at Sequoia Hospital on cardiac rehab, and it was a class on stress, and the lady said, the teacher, what's the number one cause of stress? And my hand was up, good student that I am, work. She says, yes, work can be stressful, but the number one cause of stress is sleep deprivation. Huh. Let me think about that. I'm working on it. Pausing. Gratitude. Judaism has given me such tools to deal with stress. When you sit with awe at the world, when you let the prayers remind you of the magnificent universe, it reduces your stress. Processing emotions, creating boundaries, rejecting perfectionism. These have all been pieces of stress management. I put a lot of time into it. I'm learning. I'm getting there, but I also need to be honest and not give you a pat answer. I'm not there yet. And that is okay. Because honestly, the last few years with COVID, with polarization, with events in our world have been difficult. Who could not feel stress? And I know I am not alone. I listen to your stories, to our children's stories. Stress and anxiety, loneliness and sadness. The mental health crisis is real. And when you think about causes of stress, it then focuses you on the hard, long work that needs to happen and the personal work with the questions, how do you find balance? How do you manage stress that is real? Because I promise you, it doesn't go away if you just add another thing to the to-do list. I have no magic bullet, but the other book I shared in my Rosh Hashanah sermon was Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And it had some good wisdom. Burkeman argues that it is not about being more productive. We won't reduce stress by getting everything on our list done and emptying out our inbox. He says, in fact, this is where I loved the book, all of our efforts at efficiency and all of our use of technology haven't helped. The more we get done, the more there is to do. So he teaches that we need to acknowledge we'll never finish all the things on our to-do list. And he suggests accepting the discomfort of knowing this. Listen to his words. Convenience culture seduces us into imagining that we might find room for everything important, but it's a lie. You have to choose a few things, sacrifice everything else, and deal with the inevitable sense of loss that results. Choose a few things, 2 or 3. And here's the part where I thought he was so wise. Know that that's going to create a sense of loss, because there are other things you really want to get done. But just do those things. You know how you read something and you say, yes, and I need to do it, and I have really, I don't know how I'm going to do it. The problem for me as I read his book was saying, okay, 1, 2, 3, I know what they are. These are my priorities. But 4, 5, 6, and 7, those are all really important things. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all things that if I prioritize from 1 to 10, they'd be 10s. They're too important to not do. I haven't figured this one out yet. I really need to learn this message to really be okay with the discomfort of crucial things not getting done. And that means looking even deeper. What's that about? My tshuva this year is continuing this work. It's continuing to try to prioritize and sit with that discomfort of important things not getting done, rather than beating my chest for the things I should have done. When you get to the point in the prayer book that says, for the time we've missed the mark through judgment, think about the harsh judgment we impose upon ourselves. Let's create awareness of where we've been thumping our chests harshly. Let's allow ourselves to do tshuva that is gentle and kind, so we write a beautiful book. Let's internalize Rabbi Teitelbaum's message that we can allow our mistakes and pain to propel us to greater levels of wholeness. So I want to give you some questions. What hinders your efforts at tshuva? It may be connected to mine, thinking it should be quick, not leaving room for emotions, not managing stress. But everyone has things that hinders them. Message you've received, message you've internalized. What hinders you from doing beautiful tshuva, meaningful tshuva, gentle tshuva, compassionate tshuva? What ingrained behaviors and understandings and misunderstandings of life stand in your way? Where do you beat your chest too hard? Know that God wants and welcomes our return and is patient. Emulate those qualities as we allow tshuva to be a gift we embrace, as we take it one step at a time and therefore write a beautiful book. This metaphor of book, this metaphor of being artists who write a beautiful book that God reads, is captured by Abraham Joshua Heschel in a message he gave to young people. He was interviewed, it was 1965, and they asked him, what is the most important lesson you can give to the young people? And here's what he said: let them remember there's meaning beyond absurdity. Let them be sure that every little deed counts, that every word has power, and that we can, everyone, do our share to redeem the world. In spite of all absurdities, all frustrations, and all disappointments. And above all, remember that the meaning of life is to build a life as if it were a work of art. The meaning of life is to build a life as if it were a work of art. The books we write are beautiful works of art. Let's master the craft. Let's continue to write beautiful books as we deepen our awareness of who we are and who we are meant to be in the coming year. Gmar Chatima Tova. So at this point, we will sing a nigun. If you're going to dance service, go as quietly as you can, because the noise of people coming in can be a little difficult.